Hi everyone, I'm on Litz, the CEO of October Health. Another episode of Pressure Point. Really excited today to have Lee Watts with me from Kurtosis, the CHRO there. We're going to be chatting through technology and HR, two things that don't often go together. But I think Lee and Kurtosis are doing some super exciting stuff when it comes to using tech to make HR a data-driven role within the organization. So with that, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've been waiting my turn, so I'm really glad we got you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for making your time. I think I'd love to start off every conversation with a bit of a background behind the person. So yeah, tell the audience, who is Lee?
Oh my gosh. So let's talk about how we got into HR. I think.
Yeah.
I studied an undergraduate in communication science. By all intents and purposes, should have been a marketeer, but wasn't. My first job actually came in Spain in a place called Marbella for a boutique multinational venture capitalist company.
Oh, wow.
Essentially, it was two chaps that had sold their last organization and were taking a second run at things. And from there, I discovered that HR is pretty underwhelming, actually. And I knew that if I could do things a little different with data as evidence and predictive analytics in mind, that I could, set a new trajectory for my career. And so it was a bit of a selfish move, but ultimately I think to that sentiment, it benefits the entire organization.
So, VC investments, HR, how did you get the exposure to the HR world that made you kind of realize that there was this opportunity for disruption?
Yeah, again, these are like really timeless luxuries that were afforded to me. I've been very blessed, very lucky in that I dropped across a CV to a company called Impellum, which was listed on the AIM markets in London. I was under the impression that they were engaging with clients about my profile in order to potentially get me a role with one of them. But ultimately, I ended up working for that organization. And so I was inserted into sort of a talent management capacity, primarily within financial services. And that's where the HR journey starts, essentially. It starts in the front end of HR, so the attraction, recruitment, onboarding bit. And it was only much later, through some hard work, bit of rigor, bit of luck, that I was able to cover things like the development, retention, payroll, separation, and alumni elements, which encompass the employee experience.
Okay, awesome. And I guess fast forward a couple of years, you find yourself back in South Africa.
Yes.
And now working with Kurtosis.
Yes. Yeah, very attractive company. Quick high-level look at them. So we're essentially a technology company providing commercial SaaS solutions to the investment management arena. We assist our clients in distribution and reporting capabilities. And it's over 4 territories, so Lux, the US, the UK, and South Africa. It was one of these in which my predecessor was relocating to another location. Okay. And so we had a conversation around where the HR employee experience was at that moment and where we wanted to get to. Over the course of 10 interviews, I was sold. And yeah, I've been there 2.5 years, and I've got some really epic wins out of the work that we've been doing there within the team that I currently manage. And happy to get into those. They're all data related. They're all engineering focused. We have a great HR tech stack.
So, you mentioned epic wins, right? And the only way you know if you're winning is if you can measure. So maybe that's the right place for us to start.
Yeah.
You talk about a tech stack, you talk about HR, you talk about measurability, data, right? Not often things which go together, right? I think, historically HR is not known as a metric-driven part of an organization, but you're obviously doing things differently. So maybe let's take a step back and, build a bit of that context.
Yeah.
How do you measure things? Where do you get your data from when it comes to the employee experience? And I know there's a lot to unpack there, so we can break it down. Okay. But John, let's give the audience some context.
Yeah, so this concept of being able to quantify your performance so that you are no longer seen as simply a cost center is a significant step forward for HR teams. And everybody should really be paying attention to the developments we've had in HR technology, along with the utilization of AI and narrow AI bots in various areas. So we set up this campaign, as it were, where we discerned that we didn't want to leave the employment experience to hindsight. And so with that, you need some idea, some litmus, some sort of index of where you're at, and then you can measure your progress from there. So we decided that the most obvious place to start would be to consider what stock we have. Like, who works here? What is our target audience? What is it we're trying to achieve? What current systems do we have in place? How can we automate as much as we can? And then look towards quantifying the work that's being done so that we can even render it down to the currency value. So how did we make money, save money, and ultimately improve efficiency? And what benefit was that to the organization? We started with the HRIS, the ATS, which is an applicant tracking system, and our regular human resources management system. And we made certain that we could automate the entire experience, which allows for greater data privacy and protection in the way that DocuSign does documents. We send out offers in the same manner. That then feeds into your HRMS system. It speaks to the performance management metrics where goals are set up and they're automated dependent on the throughput. Those are overlaid, of course, against things like the overall company objectives, the OKRs and the strategic pillars. And it builds all the way through that employment experience to the point where we're starting to collect information that our staff complements are providing us under the cover of anonymity for us to test against these indexes. So things like leadership, psychological safety, cross-team collaboration, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, you could quite literally create dashboards for almost anything. So we've got now to a space where we've got a ton of these dashboards, and we can present those to the executive committee across the whole organization as well. And we can show exactly where those performance indicators stem from, the intervention that occurred in order for the shift in behavior. And there's been a number of return on investment type metrics which we can share, things like reduction of attrition from 44% down to 13%.
Wow.
We can show how the performance of specific teams has increased exponentially. We can run things like employee net promoter scores and discern where we're winning and where we're not winning. And ultimately, we've arrived at a place now where we are no longer leaving the employment experience to hindsight. And so maybe we'll leave it for a little bit later in the talk, but we're now moving into the next tranche or the next phase, which is HR's own data lake and being able to pull all sorts of information, intelligently predicting our staff complements behavior.
Sure. So, I mean, super powerful, and I guess congrats on that progress over a short period of time. For anyone, watching and thinking, well, that sounds awfully complicated. Like you're a tech company. Is it all the engineers that make it happen? Like practically for a HR leader within a different business, if they wanted to do something similar, is it achievable, or do you need these tech-heavy resources?
No, so it's totally achievable, and I think there's different phases that you have to go through, and I'll give you 10 years of my life in 2 minutes. So basically, HR teams of the past are no longer HR teams of the future. And in the same way, a sports team that wants to, let's say, win the Premier League or the IPL need to go and find the best possible people speaking to that mission and vision statement. We had to do the same thing. So our HR team is not solely made up of HR people. It's made up of management consultants, marketing, PR type people. It's made up of data engineers. And so there is an HR person, but that's primarily for the paperwork, of course, right? And so with this team, if you can motivate them by providing a GPS, a direction in which they can run.
And that's your data.
Exactly, a ton can be achieved. And so there's a chap who is internal, who's helping us by using an application called, or a database called Redshift within the AWS environment, which will allow for us to have this HR data lake. But to that point, if you don't have those resources and you don't have the technical know-how and you haven't covered the compliance elements and the governance issue, then what you can do is you can partner. You can partner with third-party providers. And we did that primarily with our engagement tool. So we sourced out a nice bit of Swedish tech, which allows us to collect information submitted by the employees in a survey format under the cover of anonymity, in which we can test against the indexes and measure our progress.
So we've spoken about that tool before. I think what's super interesting is the frequency in which you collect that data. Because when I heard about it for the first time, it was not something which I'd see other organizations do. So can you share a bit more about that?
Yes. So we run a survey every week, but it's not the hour-and-a-half long, year-end engagement survey, which every employee is like, fill this thing out, see, and you get skewed results. We wanted really enriched real-time reporting. And so we run with this 7-question parameter, and the questions can be answered using emojis, right? So a green face through to a red face, depending on how they're feeling about the specific question. If additional commentary is needed or wanted, or they feel they have to provide that, then there is a spot in which they can do that. And so we text mine as well, and we're able to discern, what are Kutosians talking about? Like, how do we lift the existing limitations that they're experiencing within their roles so that we can create new business rules? And the frequency, it does seem frequent, but we've also run some research using the provider of the software and Gutenberg University, where they discerned if we change that frequency, now that we've set the frequency, we might see a drop-off of user or engagement. And so we've kept it. And important is that it's not a one and done. It's something that you have to keep driving, We literally run marketing campaigns. On the engagement tool, there's an appraisal function, one in which you can say, this colleague did great work because of X, Y, and Z. We monitor that. We make sure it's not gamed, of course, but we've introduced things like spot awards for work where you've made money, saved money, improved efficiency. And so from that tool, the employment experience has changed. We've got long-stay incentives. We've got these spot awards. We've increased leave as a result. We speak more now to things like diversity, equality, and inclusion. The next thing that we need to really start working on, which we're not very good at this stage, is wellness. And speaking to that, so that's next.
Awesome. So what I'm seeing is it seems like a theme within the organization is just quantifying everything that you do. I think an important piece is, and you've touched on the anonymity of the survey, but how do you kind of create trust with employees that Big Brother's not watching and listening, and this is something which they see the benefit of, but at the same time they're comfortable sharing because they trust organizations. I think there's obviously the hard piece, the data, but there's a softer skill around the communication and the culture where employees see this information being used in a way for good, right, and improving the experience.
Yeah, so this overlays nicely against when our CEO started. So he started roughly 2 years ago. And in that time, we had a look at the organization and then kind of repurposed its personality. So what is it we're trying to achieve? Who are we really? And how do we get further up that hockey stick? And we established new core values, which we started living to. We presented this back to the organization in a super transparent fashion. And with that transparency, over the course of time, comes trust. It's important, though, not to make any errors there, though, because the moment the trust is gone, you'll never get it back. So I think there's a lot of internal communication that occurs, something we're getting better at as well. There's a lot of campaigning that happens. There's a lot of training that is undertaken in order to utilize the tool to its full capability and also manage those adaptive management scenarios. It's really easy to go, we're going to implement a tool and then we're going to get some results and then high five, let's get a bonus. It doesn't really work that way. If there's traffic that needs to be navigated, there's U-turns that need to be taken, there's nudging for behavioral change. So I think I've answered the question, but it's an all-encompassing, dedicated resource who owns that like a product owner would.
Yeah, and I think important piece as well, I mean, you've got to take these softer human elements into account to drive that culture, right? And to build the trust, right? To be able to do the things that you're doing. Maybe to, again, focus in on data, on metrics and measurability. You've spoken to kind of churn being a North Star metric, right? And that's something easy to measure, right? Let's get churn as low as possible, right? Regrettable churn as low as possible. What are some of the other metrics that you look to as an HR leader to kind of prove your worth, prove your ROI back to the business?
So great question and super topical. Almost like I planted that question. So we've built a career development ladder, which is amazing. We've also undertaken some management development and efficacy type programs.
Okay.
And so the data that we're running at the moment, not primarily or solely out of this tool, but across the entire tech stack, things like goal setting, follow through, the softer salient items such as one-on-ones and frequency, we've built into a tool, and it's run on a Python script. Essentially, we've weighted a score dependent on what we as an organization feel is important to management efficacy and the effectiveness. And then we've overlaid that against those indexes which we test against. Now, it's super transparent. Any manager, any employee can log on and they can have a look at any of these indexes, any of these dashboards. From a strategic OKR perspective, the Exco have a Jira board. And on that Jira board, you can see exactly what they're working on at any moment. And to that point, if you're working on something that isn't related in some way, shape, and form to that board, stop working on it. You're busy working on certain things. So with that level of transparency and with that level of direction and focus, and then with that ability to quantify these dashboards, we are able to provide each manager in each area with their own quarterly management efficacy score. And naturally, that then is leveraged against their overall performance. So when you go to H1 performance appraisal or H2 year end, and you're looking for a salary increase, or you're looking for a bonus or some form of loyalty premium, you can demonstrate in a quantifiable way what your performance was, how it's increased, and why you're of value to the organization. Now, it's not about answering for yourself, but it's being proud and transparent about the performance, and showing that it is a step in the right direction. And I think to that, it takes away from the he said, she said, subjective management approach. And so if you can win that argument through a conversation using data as the evidence, it's a job well done.
Sure. No, I think super powerful, and congrats. I mean, that sounds like a game changer. I think a softer point that you touched on, but I think is so important for organizations, is this point of alignment,
yes.
Right? And what am I doing on a day-to-day basis, and how does that align with the key OKRs of the organization? And important that, one, there's that transparency that exists, and there's the accountability, and employees know how their role actually feeds into the broader OKRs. And if it's not, then maybe you should relook at what you're doing. So just another great point that I think you're getting from this transparency, because there's so many organizations where if you had to ask an employee, they wouldn't know what the overall OKRs are of the business. So I think by creating this transparency, by putting data front and center, you're just ensuring alignment as well. So all these data pieces have a very clear cultural impact on the ability of the organization to perform. So super, super powerful. And I just wanted to kind of make that observation.
And, I don't want the message to be misunderstood in that the systems process, the programs we're running, they're not to individualize or ostracize a person. This is team efforts. You know what I mean? We're in a team. And ultimately, the data assists in a plethora of ways. But if you were to talk about, let's say, feeling and how I'm feeling. So, my son came home the other day and he got 8 out of 10 for his maths test, right? And he was like, oh man, those last 2 points. And I thought to myself, but hey, if you have a look at, let's say, the class average, and we've got to be careful when you play that game, but if you look at the class average and then you look at where you've scored, you've done really great. And the data does that for us in commerce too, which is, okay, so these are the objectives and key results. We didn't quite get 100%, but look, we got 90% of the way there. We know where to track and check and change in order for us to achieve that 100% next time. So progress over perfection always. And then that last real thing around that data transparency and the ability to quantify one's performance, it's like looking in the mirror. You know what I mean? You see the blind spots, and you can't grow without sort of shedding some light on those blind spots. And so if people are seen and they are heard, then they belong. And if we're treating everyone with fairness, kindness, and respect, then this very quantified approach to the management of humans is kind of like HR's API to unlocking the human module,
Yeah, it's about potential.
And I think a lot more companies need to use that, and a lot more HR teams embracing this will have a seat at the top table. I can guarantee that much.
Yeah, oh, well, it's so powerful. And I think I love also the way you framed it around not only using the data to measure against a goal, right? It's about benchmarking, right? Are you doing better? It's not just the absolute number, it's relative to a benchmark, which again, without the data, you can't do. And also it gives you the ability to experiment and tweak and reflect. Okay, well, I did this and this is my outcome. What else can I do from the people perspective, and then measure the result? And is it having the desired result? If so, yes, double down. If not, then pivot, right? Try something else.
And the dashboards are amazing. If you can create a dashboard and it's aesthetically pleasing, right? And it's super easy to use. You can look at it in a time-stamped way. And I just find there's something quite almost evocative and emotional about it when you go, yes, it's working, or oh, okay, whoa, stop, it's not, In that instance, I think you don't run too far in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and I think it's an important piece that you've also raised around frequency of measurability, right? You're not waiting for quarterly surveys at best in most organizations, generally twice a year, to kind of realize, oh shit, the last 6 months haven't gone well. You're tracking that in real time, and you can course correct to ensure that it's not a job of hindsight.
Yeah, and you've actually just reminded me now that you said that, the way that the sentiment is measured, right? So there's a lot of machine learning, and then there's a narrow AI bot within the tool that allows intelligent prediction of potential turnover. The way the sentiment is read, or the machine learns, is when the result is returned. So you might send out your survey on a Tuesday, right? And Mary answers it on a Wednesday in a happy way. And then 2 weeks later, her unique ID returns a result, but it's on a Friday and it's grumpy. She's grumpy. And you think, jeepers, what happened on Friday? And you can start to really drill down to having a more even keel across the Monday through Friday, or the week through the month, or the month through the quarter.
Yeah, and I think picking up on those nuances, picking up on those subtleties, so difficult to do without technology, right? Or so difficult to do in a structured manner in the way that the technology is enabling you to do today. You touched on kind of AI and an AI bot, which is helping you with prediction. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah.
Because I think that's of a lot of interest.
So there's some technical limitations to my knowledge around this, but the AI bot that we're using is narrow AI, and it has sort of parameters or thresholds that it can read within. And the ability of the bot is to intelligently predict turnover, so potential loss of employee in a team, dependent on a trend that the machine has learned to identify. And so we have scenarios where we get trend reports, and in there it'll show you where things are going well, where things are going badly, and then it also highlights the pillar to which you need to focus. So let's say, for example, you've got an engineering team and it's intelligently predicting that you're at risk of losing 3 engineers within the next 6 months. It'll say, focus on personal development, or focus on leadership trust index. So it really starts to give you an idea where to narrow in on in order to intervene. So a nudge for behavioral change, so that you don't leave the employment experience to hindsight. Because the next time you hear that information is at an exit interview. But by then, it's too late.
Okay. So again, I think what's super powerful about that is, 1, it's predictive, and 2, it's giving you tangible, practical changes that you can make.
Yes.
So like feedback loop, is this a platform that managers have access to directly, and they're like, okay, red alert, got a potential issue in my engineering team, I need to do more around personal development.
Yes.
So what does a manager do with that? Is that where you come in? Are they empowered to solve themselves?
So this is now also where we are with this management leadership development program, is within the receipt of that feedback and then the action items suggested, you have to equip the managers to be able to perform the role that you've employed them to perform and that you trust them wholeheartedly to do. And so, yes, it'll come back to us, and we will work on the areas where we're weaker, rather than leveraging always the areas where we're strong. And we'll just, over the course of time, iterate our way to, this place of perfection, this utopia. But it's a very effective tool if used correctly. And that's just one piece. I mean, Alon, if we had 3 weeks, I could talk to you about every piece of the tech stack that we're currently using. But I think as a starting point for folks sitting in HR, not sure what to do next, start with your own stock, look to automate, and then fuel your passion that way. Let's see where it takes you.
Awesome. So I think I'd love to, to your point, you're not a technical person, but clearly with a passion for data, a passion for technology. How do you go about learning? How do you go about upskilling yourself to ensure that you can do or bring the innovation into the business?
Yes. So it started selfishly. Okay. If I'm going to be completely honest, it was like some shameless self-promotion effort where I thought to myself, how can I prove to my employer that I'm worth X, Y, Z? Okay. So this is the function I perform. How can I squeeze all of the juice out of that orange, And I just started. And for me, it was Laszlo Bock's book, Work Rules. He was the former senior vice president of Google People Operations, and I think he runs his own company now, Google Fumu. And I don't know, just some of the stuff that they were doing between 2003 and 2007, I was just like, mind blown. Imagine being able to intelligently predict your employees' behavior. Imagine the depth of capability and the wealth of resource that could really be. And with previous experiences of HR teams where I was completely bored and underwhelmed, I figured, if we marry these two together, it'll work. And from there, it went from one thing to another. I mean, I ended up with people like Angela Duckworth and Adam Grant. And what's really interesting about these sorts of thought leaders is they quantify everything they do. So it's not just I think this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think that's what grit is. They go and quantify it. And so I figured, that's probably the answer for this chapter that I'm in. And now I just find myself using things like YouTube or there's thought leadership articles that come out from places like Harvard Online. There's, you could type any question in ChatGPT and it'll give you some sort of answer that maybe you weren't aware existed. And so I think rather than being stuck, just start moving,
So I think it's this trait of continuous learning, right? Where you have to, right? Knowledge is your power, right? And the more you consume, the better you can do. I think another important point that you touch on is that the data is the measurable aspect of what you're doing.
Yeah.
But the human element's still important, right? If, you've got a poor manager, right, with no level of EQ and they told, well, you need to increase communication or relationships within your team and they're unable to do so, you're still going to kind of fall short.
Yes.
Right. So I think really important, that point that you raised earlier around empowering managers and still ensuring that those soft skills are in place, but getting the early warning signs in a very objective manner is where the power comes in, right? It's still about people. It's just about giving you and your managers superpowers to detect what's going on.
Exactly. And consider EQ. The Bradbury and Greaves, they did a book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and they quantify EQ. So again, yes, quantification is simply the scorecard or the measurement of it, but the ability to progress and show that progress from the index, the base point which you started, is part of our management development program. They will do an assessment, and then there's an analysis on the assessment, and then we work on those blind spots moving.
Okay, so that's...
Yeah, it has to be. Because there's some people, there's some people I like to talk to, and some people I don't love to talk to, right? And why is that?
Yeah.
It's because they're better at those scenarios, that situational judgment and management than others.
So do you actually create these personalized plans?
Oh, we're working on it.
Okay.
We're working on it. It's a huge bit of pie. So we're working on it.
Oh, yeah, great place to start with the data.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, Lee, loved it. I think learned a lot. I think if we go back and we take a step back, it's all about, finding the data to measure your impact. And that rings true for every element of the business. Why does it not ring true for HR? And I think you've proven it does. And you've proven it's achievable. And you're showing how valuable that ongoing pulse of the organization is from an early detection perspective to predict and preempt and hopefully prevent, negative consequence down the line. So you don't leave the job of HR to one of hindsight. You actually become a change maker within the organization using the latest and the greatest technology, which ultimately is on you as a leader to learn and take on and implement within the business.
100%. And I mean, the last piece I need to highlight, my mother would never forgive me if I didn't. This is not going to take anyone's job, what we're doing here. This is simply going to enhance you. It gives you the cape to your superpower capability. It really does.
And the perfect way to end it off. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.